Hello again, friend. Thank you for joining me today. Excuse me. Uh, yeah, I'm not going to give any information. There's nothing I need to talk about. We're just going to get right into what I want to talk about. I received an email from Anna. Excuse me, and she's been following along. So thank you, Anna. Appreciate that. There are others that have sent me some messages, a few of you. If you are following along and you appreciate this and you would care to take the time to drop a note to your farmer, I'd be obliged. It's encouraging to know that folks, that you are actually following along and that this is making any impact on your life. So Anna's question, would washing the triple washed organic salad in a bag make it clean, parentheses, as in your definition of clean? It's a good question. The direct answer is no. Sorry. But allow me to explain. And as usual, I have my computer opened up here so I can stay on track and not get all head down rabbit trails all over the place. So why do I say no? Here's how we're going to skin the cat. First of all, how do pesticides work? And what, in addition to that, what do GMOs mean and how do they work? I do a brief explanation of that. Ingredient list, we're going to talk about an ingredient list. We're going to talk about briefly about processing, the explanation. Then how can you know? And then I'm going to try and wrap everything up so it makes sense. So the first thing is pesticides. How do they work? A pesticide is a product that has a chemical reaction, a biological chemical reaction. So a pesticide, by its very nature and by its very name, is a side, poison, to kill a pest. Well, the thing is that a pesticide isn't only applied to a pest. A pesticide is also applied to the crop, because if you had the crop, I've got to look over here to see what I'm doing. If you had the crop and then the pest was way over here, then that pest wouldn't really be a pest to the crop, right? You could apply it to just the pest, but it wouldn't really be a pest because it's not having an effect on the crop, right? Now I can look back here. So a pesticide has to be applied to the crop as well. The reason it doesn't kill the crop is that it's formulated and the pest is formulated in such a way so that it doesn't have an adverse effect on the crop. It only has an adverse effect on the pest. So if a pesticide is applied, it's applied to the crop as well as the pest. This includes pasture for livestock and for the chickens that I grow. It goes for, I give a nice little list here. No, it doesn't. Or no, I didn't. It goes for, yeah, I did. I just can't find it. I know I did. It goes for pasture. It goes for trees, so like the fruit from trees that you eat. Well, that has had a pest applied to it. I know that it's true because we have a few fruit trees in our backyard, peaches and pears and apples, and I can guarantee you, I promise you, that pests get into that fruit, particularly right when it gets ripe. That's when they really show up and the bugs start burrowing in and, they make a hot mess of it. We don't spray it because if we find a bug, we either spit it out or cut around it if we're cutting it out. So we're willing to do that because it's ours and for us. Let's see. So pesticides are also applied to vegetables, and they're applied to everything. So let me just look. Oh yes, I have a wonderful aside for you. Here's a little rabbit trail. If your yard is not loaded with dandelions when the dandelions are out, or clover, like even now in the summertime, if you don't have clover or thistle and things like that in your grass, guess what? Your yard is loaded with pesticides. And further than that, those pesticides and fertilizers that you hire applied to your grass to make it look pretty, which I don't blame you. If I lived in town, I'd want my yard to be beautiful. Those fertilizers and pesticides are what's really causing the runoff problems that you hear about on the news. They're not as much as they used to be, but farmers don't apply any more than they have to accomplish the job. They can't afford it, and it doesn't make any sense. But homeowners want everything to be just right, and it doesn't really, in your economy, in your budget, it's not that big a line item, so you want it to be right, and that's what the companies that you hire do. They fertilize. When I watch guys that are out applying pesticides to grass, I can't believe what I'm seeing done. The control, the application control is, just a minute, I got a tickle. Excuse me. I just ate one of those peaches and it's sticking in my throat a little bit. The control, the application control is non-existent. When we used to use pesticides when we were industrialized farmers, we knew to the half gallon or less, it was actually even computerized, how much we were applying per acre. Not even just to a small yard. We knew exactly, and it was exact every time because it costs a lot of money. So you want it to be exact. And the fertilizer was the same. It's all computer controlled and exact. So the runoff, unfortunately, is in fact being caused generally by homeowners. All right, that's the end of that aside. So the pesticide, getting back to pesticides, is a biological chemical reaction. And when we were industrialized farming for most of the time, because when we quit industrialized farming, GMOs were just starting to hit the market, and we only got to use them. And I do say God, I'll explain that in the future, but we only had use of them for 2 or 3 years before we quit, and then we stopped. So before that, then we had to use what was called a specific pesticide or herbicide. And they're specific in the following way. I'm going to give you a list of 4 different ways. There were 4 different types. There was a broadleaf pesticide or herbicide for a grass. Corn is a grass, so you'd have a broadleaf type pesticide to apply to a grass crop. You had a grass pesticide to apply to a grass crop. All right, so that covers grass, broadleaves and grasses in a grass crop. And then there's also a broadleaf pesticide or herbicide for a broadleaf crop, which would be soybeans in our case, and a grass pesticide to apply in a broadleaf crop. So we used basically 4 different pesticide formulations that had 4 different, they were just 4 different types, right? And so sometimes we could mix, if we were going out to spray corn, we could mix the grass pesticide and the broadleaf pesticide into one mix together. But sometimes you had to keep them separate. And when you had one that was separate, you had to clean out the sprayer. You had to use basically soap and water, mix it up and spray it through, rinse it out, rinse it out. And then we also had to wash off the exterior of the sprayer because you didn't want the residue from one product that you use that would be toxic if you were mixing it with another product to your crop. And if it weren't toxic, we would have mixed them together and done it in one trip rather than making another trip and cleaning everything out. The other time you had to clean out was when you changed crops, because if you had any hint of a broadleaf pesticide from spraying your corn, your grass, and you had that left over and you went out and you sprayed your beans, guess what? You wouldn't have any beans left. It'd all be dead. So, you know, you were really careful. So pesticides work in a biological chemical reaction, and what that means is that the pesticide goes into the crop, the vegetable, the pasture, the tree, and it's ingested by the plant and digested by the plant, just the same as it's ingested and digested by the pest. Okay? So the pesticide is in the plant. It's part of the plant. The plant has consumed that, just like the plant consumes sun and water and nutrients. It also consumes the pesticide. It has to. It doesn't have some way of saying, "Oh, that's a pesticide. I'm not gonna consume that." No, it doesn't. You don't even have that. And you've got a brain, right? So the pesticides that are put on to a field of crops to control the pests is also applied to the crops. It has to be. It's just, there is no way around it. So the next thing I want to talk about, I hope that explains that idea, particularly for you, Anna. The next thing I want to talk about is just to kind of hit on GMO real quick. I'll get into more depth on GMOs in a later visit, but let's just, it kind of is germane here, so we'll just kind of give a quick poop and hit on GMOs. So until Monsanto figured out how to do the GMOing process, genetically modifying an organism, we had to use specific pesticides. A pesticide that was specific, like one of those four. Obviously, there are a lot more than that, but that's what I am familiar with, so I'm only going to talk about that. You had to use a specific, but once Monsanto figured out how to do the modifying, then the first modification they did was for Roundup. Roundup is a non-specific pesticide, herbicide, which means it kills everything. In fact, if you used enough Roundup and sprayed it on a tree, you could kill that tree just the same as you kill whatever else you might spray it on, you know, the cracks in your driveway. That's what Roundup does, and that's what it's good at. So Monsanto found a gene. I've heard a few times it was like pond scum or something that they found that was resistant to glyphosate, Roundup, and they isolated that and reproduced it and then forced it into a soybean seed, which is teeny, like the size of, well, you probably know, you've seen them. You know, they forced those genes into a soybean using a gene gun. Again, I'm just hitting on this, okay? I'll describe it a lot more later. I know quite a bit about it. And that gene then was part of the DNA, and they grew out those first few plants, and it worked. They planted those seeds, the plants grew, and they sprayed it with Roundup, and it didn't kill the beans. It's fantastic management tool to be able to spray a herbicide on a crop that the herbicide kills everything, no questions asked, but your crop stands is remarkable. It's just, you don't have to wash out your sprayer anymore. You don't have to, I won't even bore you with all the details. Trust me, it was a great management tool, and it made our lives so much easier as industrialized farmers. Just another quick note, I don't even have this written down, but to do the modifying, to GMO something, takes a ton of money and a ton of time to walk it through the FDA and USDA and all of the things that have to be done. So modifying crops are only done to crops which are huge amounts so that Monsanto can get their money back out of the effort and the cost. So sweet corn is not modified, lettuce is not modified. All of these things that you hear so often that are modified, oh, that's GMO'd, it's not, all right? There are very few, organisms that are actually modified because it is so expensive and it's so difficult. I'm sure that Monsanto is working on doing as many as they can, but at the end it goes to the bean counters and it's got to make sense. So, corn, soybeans, it's, as far as I know, it's not even done to wheat, at least that is popularly used. I've heard that they've done experiments that got away from them, but they're not selling modified wheat. Genetically modified wheat. So set that aside. So it is this. See, it's good I've got notes, otherwise I get off on tangents. It's the biological chemical reaction that makes it so you can't wash the pesticide off. It's the plant has consumed it, it has digested it, and the pesticide is formulated in such a way that it doesn't kill the crop. So then you get to eat it. Great, right? All right, so I covered pretty good. Oh, and that's why I'm so adamant about this. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. We're going to do that later. Ingredient list. This is an interesting thing to me. I love ingredient lists, and Kirsten has really begun, when we buy something that's not fresh, she really looks at the ingredient list, and she's become quite adept and adroit at knowing what the products are, what those 20-syllable words mean. But here's the problem with an ingredient list. And it's a big problem, all right? So a product and an ingredient, so like we talked about Fiber One bars, right? And I only went through, I'm sorry, I've got problems going on here. I only went through the first ingredient because it proved my point with just doing the one ingredient, and that was the chicory root and the extract and how they extracted it. But the product list was long. Well, the last product, the very last product down here in that list was over 2% of the quantity of that product. Anything less than 2% is not listed. It doesn't have to be listed. So here's the problem. Well, you can say, 2%, what effect does that make? Well, for one thing, how many 2% are there in it? You don't know, because they don't have to tell you, and they're not just going to go, here's all the 2%. The less than 2%, because their product list would be as long as your leg. But here's the other problem, is going back to my industrialized farming life, when we had a product that we would use that used 2 ounces, I'm making sure you had 2 ounces per acre of product. 2 ounces. 2 ounces on 43,560 square feet. How many percent of the soybean do you think 2 ounces over 43,560 acres. How many percent do you think that is? Is it going to equal the 2% threshold? No. In fact, it's infinitesimally small. I'm sure Sheldon from Big Bang Theory could do a math project and figure it out, but it is incredibly small. And even Roundup, the hated Roundup, man, we used to call it activity. We got great control by using 1.5 quarts. 1.5 quarts. That's like 3 of your normal household measuring cups full of Roundup for a whole acre, 43,560 square feet. There was 6 measuring cups of Roundup on that whole area. Do you think that makes the 2% threshold? No. All right. So that's the problem. That's the first problem with the labeling. The other problem is that when was the last time you saw a product list label on anything that was fresh, like vegetables or meat? Have you ever seen one? I haven't. The only time I've ever seen one is on chicken, and I might be getting ahead of myself into processing. So forgive me if the video doesn't match up with what's written exactly. But chicken, if you look on there, the fine print says X number of percent solution, like flavor solution. It's flavor enhancers, and they inject that into the chicken so that it has any flavor at all. Here's the other thing that they don't have on the package at all is, you know how, well, you may not know, beef that you buy in the grocery store is gray. It's gray to me anyhow. And it shouldn't be. The reason it's gray is because it's full of water. When you put water on red meat, it turns gray. Chemical biological reaction, fancy word, huh? I sound really smart when I say that. I'm smart, but I'm not. So the red meat has less than 2% of that water solution injected into it, so it doesn't have to be listed on the label, but I promise you it is right at 2% because that meat's gray. The other thing with fresh meat, and I only talked about grass-fed, grass-finished beef here when I wrote it, but any fresh beef, whether it's grass-fed and finished or not, if it doesn't have water in it, is red. It is red, red, red. And it is soft, like warm butter. And when you push your finger into it, you know, just like warm butter, when you push your finger into warm butter, the imprint from your finger stays in the butter. It doesn't bounce back out. Well, good fresh meat that's not loaded with water is like butter. It doesn't bounce back out, and it is redder than red and soft as soft. So your meat, your red meat, has water in it. You're welcome. There's a little bit of information that you probably didn't want. So let's move on then to processing. Just a little more bad news. And I'm going to, this is another topic that I'm going to get into in more depth in the future, but I'm just going to hit on it and bounce on it. Did you know that the chicken that you buy in the grocery store has, in its processing, in the process of it being processed, it is subjected to multiple solutions of water with acid. It is laden with acid, which is also why it has a funny color and a funny feel, in addition to being injected with a flavor enhancing solution, which, by the way, if they didn't inject that in there, you wouldn't eat it because it tastes like nothing or less than nothing. All right. So processing. So we talked, I think the reason that Anna asked about, does washing your triple washed organic lettuce count and fulfill the need for clean food? was because I talked about lettuce being rinsed in water and what was it, hydrochloric acid, right? And then, oh yeah, so and then it's sprayed with preservative, which I call wax because when I was writing this, I could not remember preservative to save my life. Does it count? No, it doesn't count because that solution is getting into the crop, into the lettuce, into the meat, into the whatever. If it didn't, then it wouldn't be done. If it didn't actually get in it, it wouldn't help. It doesn't do any good to do it on the outside. Or just kind of lightly mist it. It has no effect. Holy crud. I just saw the time. This is getting long. All right, so those processes have an effect, and further, they don't even tell you about them. It's not on the label. All right, I got to hurry because, well, what does it all mean? How can you know? How can you know? You should know the answer to how you can know. So repeat after me. Know your farmer and trust your food. Right? Know your farmer, trust your food. Say it again. Know your farmer, trust your food. Know your farmer, trust your food. Because if you don't know your farmer, I hope I'm teaching you and I'm showing you and that it's sinking in, you cannot trust your food. All right? So what does it all mean? The last point. What does it all mean? Well, I hope that I've given you at least a cursory understanding of how pesticides work and a cursory understanding of the ingredient list, a cursory understanding of GMOs, and I hope that I've shown you that processed food, that food is processed, rather. I'm kind of reading it without my glasses on. I hope I've shown you that food is processed. If it's in the grocery store, it's been processed. Period. End of story. And so the only way that you can know what you're eating is to know your farmer. You got to know your farmer. You got to trust him to be providing what you think you're getting, because clearly you can't get it at the grocery. All right. And then once you do find a farmer, and this is the very last paragraph in the written below, please, please, please support him. Support his family. Support what he's doing. Spend your money with him. Spend lots of your money with him. And do it regularly. Do it every single week. That family is counting on you. They are giving their life's blood for you to have good food. And all they just want to help you, and they want to be supported. They're just trying to eke out a living. So if you find one that is a good farmer, that is not using pesticides, that is growing clean food, support him. Is that too much to ask? And support him by telling your friends. Tell Facebook. Tell Twitter. Tell the world. Help them. Help us. Help the movement. It's an uphill battle from our vantage. Help us. You're our best help. And by the way, we wouldn't mind the support too. We have clean chicken. We care. We could really use your support. All right, so now I'm at 28 minutes. This has been a long visit. I apologize. There's so much more I want to say. It's hard to contain myself. Thankfully, I have the screen. So, all right, until next time, have a good day and eat well.